Hello, this is Palico Padge and welcome back to another Sleepy Sunday Let's Play episode with the game The Away Team Lost Exodus added content. And we are still struggling for food. We had a bit of an interesting thing that went on in the last episode. We've been desperately low on food for the past sort of episode and a half, and we were given the chance to go and explore a planet which had part of one of the spaceships which left Earth before us crash landed underneath the water. As it turns out, our suits were able to cope with the depth of where this part of the ship was, and there was heat coming from it and all sorts of jiggery pokery. So we decided to go and have a look, and alas, we came across a part in the cryogenics section of a crew member. Was he dead, or she dead, or was he or she alive? We didn't know, but we took it to the surface anyway. We thought, well, you can't leave a man behind. A good captain does not leave a man behind. Gosh darn it! So we took it up, and as it turns out, they were dead. so we processed them into food instead, and we managed to get a little bit further along our journey. As a side point, which has been brought to my attention, I've been on and off with a developer of this game on Twitter, and he did let me know that there is a chance that that person would be alive. So as it turns out, instead of it really being sort of an insightful thing to tell me, it was more of like, here's what you could have won. Like, you know those classic games of the 80s and 90s where you have the big grand final and you fluff it right at the end and they go, oh, sorry about that, here's what you could have won. That's how it kind of feels right now. I was like, oh, okay. But we did get a little bit of food, and as it stands, it helped us into the next section, which is where we are now. We do have only 2 food and a hell of a lot of fuel. So once more, we will be scavenging for food, and hopefully something will come along which will help us on that. But as it stands right now, we can go to Orwell 64 or Benford 65. Well, we better do it numerically, I guess. I don't know if there's a certain advantage to one or another. No, let's do it as we said. Orwell it is. Oh, it looks rather rocky. So it's a Star Class G. Also, we're in the Star Class G system. Planet Terran, 21 degrees Celsius, cozy, t-shirt weather, 22% oxygen, so not the best. Gravity is pretty darn high, but habitability is 99.99%. I mean, can't really argue with that, can you? As far as statistics are concerned, that's pretty good. Summary: the planet below is warm, oxygen-rich, and seismically stable. Yeah, this is going to be the sort of episode I just won't be able to get my words out. And I'm there. Right. It has plenty of water beneath a relatively rocky surface. Gravity on par with that of Earth and a stable orbit. In all respects, it looks like a good candidate for a new home for humanity, which is why it was the destination of one of the predecessor ships and was in your system. But if all that is true, then why is the only sign of habitation a single satellite repeating the same warning message over and over? Ironically, the only way to find out is to ignore the warning and send the crew down. Well, this is me, and I tend to throw caution to the wind and we just send people in head first, and if we get out, great. If we drop an engine on someone, then so be it. So who are we going to send this time around? You know what, I'm not feeling too confident this time around. I don't think I want to send my best in. I mean, there's a warning going out. I don't think the captain should leave the ship, so Jean-Luc can stay behind. This time around, I think we will send... well, it's going to have to be the old space wizard as the leader. Dr. Phil's coming along. He's going to be the medic. And George LaForge is the engineer. I think that makes most sense. Yes. So, you debate whether or not to tell the crew. The warning is vague. Technically, it's not even a clear warning. Just 00000 repeated over and over in binary. That could mean many different things. It could mean there's something down there that's dangerous, or it could be a warning to anything dangerous to stay away. And if it is the latter, it could be a bluff. You detect no weapon systems, nor indeed anything artificial at all, beyond the satellite. In the end, however, you decide to let the crew know about the message. You also remind them that the raw fuel and food supplies are not unlimited, and it may be worth a visit regardless, just to stock up on whatever you can. Yes, food. We need food. The crew agrees that it's worth the risk, especially since the risk is so vague. The shuttle decouples from the ship a few moments later, and within an hour it's on the ground. The landing area, selected somewhat arbitrarily, as there are no distinguishing features to target, remains as unnoteworthy as it was from the air, and the crew fans out a bit to look for anything that might prove more interesting. The surface is remarkably smooth, not flat, but without any obvious craters or peaks to explore. It takes the better part of an hour before Space Wizard finds anything at all, and even then the hole in the ground appears to be little more than that. Just a hole, about 2 meters in diameter, entering a low rise at about a 10% grade. Sensors seem to indicate that the tunnel is probably artificial, you tell the crew. It remains remarkably consistent for a very long way down. On the bright side, it's probably safe and it'll be an easy journey. On the other hand, that means theoretically someone or something made it, so maybe it was only designed to look safe. Plus, walking back up will be a little bit harder than going down. Oh, logic. You can't argue with cold logic. Do we really have any choice, says Space Wizard? So do we tell them outright no, or do we just not answer? Well, again, cold, hard logic. We're a computer. We don't mess about with our answers. There's no lulling on the answer. We tell them it as it is, and then it's up to them to decide what we want to do. We've got no food. Get your ass down there. No, not really. No, you say, unless you want to just head back up to the ship and risk running out of food. But the crew isn't really listening, already focused on moving underground. As you suspected, the additional readings from the crew's suit sensors confirm that the tunnel is likely artificial, at least in the sense that it was created in part by some intelligent being. The sides are smooth and even, the diameter almost perfectly consistent, and the grade steady. Something definitely bored this tunnel, though whether it was a machine or a man or some other animal, there's no way to know, at least not yet. The tunnel figuratively snakes downwards in a barely perceptible but steady coil, such that after about a 20-minute walk, the crew is almost directly below where they entered from the surface. Perhaps not coincidentally, this is right about when the tunnel begins to branch out. The first intersection the crew comes to they ignore, but after the second and third they pause to take stock of the situation. Space Wizard suggests that it might be best to just continue following the main tunnel. If there were no navigational assistance from our suits and sensors, I'd say to backtrack and stick to the every right fork, but since that's not an issue, the main corridor seems the safest bet, unless we see something of interest. Unfortunately, this plan only proves valid for another 10 minutes or so, at which point the corridor comes to a definitive end. Two corridors snake off in different directions, but almost as if designed to be intentionally confusing. Neither one of them could be said to be the straight-ahead option. One corridor heads towards the left and slopes down, one slopes down towards the right. Do we take the left corridor, or do we take the right corridor? Well, I'm in the mood of always being right, so let's follow the right corridor. The right corridor narrows a bit, almost to the point where the crew considers abandoning it completely. However, just after its narrowest point, it opens back up again and straightens out. It almost seems like something borrowing from below met up at some point with something coming down from above, and then they never bothered fixing the seam completely. Even inside atmospheric suits, the air becomes more stifling down here. The filters can't quite keep out the odour, which the crew finds at once displeasing and intriguing, like someone is barbecuing with spoiled meat, suggests Dr. Phil. Dr. Phil. As they descend, apparently the strange odour of cooked meat only grows stronger, and the crew, not having tasted anything of the sort in quite some time, seem to pick up speed a bit, despite not being sure what it is they're smelling. After a few minutes of walking, a second tunnel joins this one from above. Fortunately, it's distinct enough that navigating back up won't be too much of an issue. If nothing else, the crew should be able to find their way out just by moving away from the odour, which is becoming overpowering. I'd really expect to see some sort of insect life by now, says Space Wizard. This smell, it's just overpowering, like there's a giant pile of rotting meat somewhere just around the corner, or all around us, or like we're inside some giant creature's intestinal tract or something. The likelihood of this latter being true is small. The tunnels are not only smooth but bone dry. If the crew was inside something living, by any definition of life you are aware of, that would have to be at least some sign of moisture present. These corridors do not resemble intestines other than in that they are relatively twisty. Let's keep moving then, at least a bit longer. According to your maps of the terrain and sensor readings from the crew, they're just over a kilometre below the surface, although you'd suspect that they felt it was much further due to the way the tunnels loop over and over again horizontally. They've probably travelled at least 4 or 5 kilometres. yet they don't seem as tired as you'd expect. They seem to almost have gained in strength and vigour. Oh, I butchered that paragraph. And then suddenly the corridor comes to a distinct end, opening up into an immense chamber. The ceiling is only about twice human height, but the sides of the room are so far out as to be imperceptible, even considering the quality of the crew's helmet lamps. It could easily stretch for tens of kilometres or farther. There's no way to be sure, and no way you'd ask the crew to verify. Besides, they have other things to look at. In stark contrast to the barren, dry tunnels they've been walking, the chamber is filled with moisture. Water, at least you hope it's water, drips from the ceiling into puddles on the floor, and the walls nearby are riddled with rivulets of moisture that briefly turn into a minor cascade as the crew passes by. But this is not what draws the crew's attention. Rather, it is the bulbous masses filling the centre of the chamber, seemingly everywhere but for a metre-wide area around the perimeter of the cavern. There's no word for them but what they clearly are. Eggs, sickly off-white in colour, each approximately twice as large as a human head and too opaque to see through. The crew begins to make gagging sounds. Is there a problem? Oh, the smell, says Space Wizard. You are at once glad and disturbed that there's no way for you to perceive what the crew is smelling. You have larger concerns, however, like the fact that these eggs, for whatever reason, aren't showing up as life forms on the scanners. Very curious, to put it mildly. Any opinions on how to handle this? The crew seems torn on what to do. Although you can sense that part of their brains want to just rip their helmets off and dive into the middle of the room, you'll have to make a quick decision. Smash everything to pieces, harvest some of the eggs, enact a full and immediate retreat. I mean, if they were a real issue, then surely they would have been detected as life forms. But on the other hand, we've got a satellite in the air telling people to back off from the planet. So, I mean, if we start smashing stuff up, is it going to attract the mommies and daddies? Because I don't want to be messing with any mommies and daddies who lay eggs twice the size of a human head. That to me does not say safety at all. I'm sure health and safety would say something about that if we were to fill out the appropriate certificates. Harvest some of the eggs. I mean, yes, super duper omelettes if they don't suck onto our face and burst out our chest cavity. Or we can enact a full and immediate retreat. You know, I have found playing this game in the past that if you do the sensible option, sometimes it doesn't pan out too well for you. So, you know what? We're hungry. Let's get some of the eggs. You didn't go all the way down there just to walk out empty-handed, you say. They're eggs, they're food. So let's harvest some and get back to the shuttle. Just be careful. I suggest we approach this less like a harvest and more like a surgery, says Dr. Phil. We don't know for sure if these things are alive or not. But assuming they are, let's assume that keeping them that way will benefit us. And let's assume that breaking them, as with any egg, will probably kill whatever's inside. This proves quite easy, in fact. The eggs, if that's what they are, have a very tough, leathery exterior. There is a thin membrane attaching them to the ground, but it's easy enough to sever with one's fingers. After that, it's a fairly simple feat to simply lift them off the ground intact. The crew begins to make their way up the long, snaky corridor at a leisurely pace. It takes several hours, and they are cranky and complaining about muscle aches by the time they emerge on the surface, but we ignore their griping. Once they're back on the ship and prepped for a system jump, the cryo process will get rid of any permanent injuries, of which there are probably none anyway. The humans like to complain. Oh, we are a miserable bunch, aren't we? Especially us in Britain. We like to complain. The English, great. We're great at queuing, we're great at talking about the weather, and we're great about complaining. Yes, yes, yes. Almost out of there, guys. Once they're safely back on the ship, you leave the crew to decompress and de-stress while you look over the data gathered via sensor readings. The satellite's odd behaviour remains unchanged and appears to be no threat, so you completely ignore that. If it was intended to signal something, it would take years for the message to be received. There's nothing sentient in this system except you and your crew. You do a deeper chemical analysis of the contents of the egg. The shell itself is unremarkable. Tough proteins similar to what you'd find in a lizard egg or some sort of insect, as opposed to a harder shelled bird egg. What's inside, though, is much more interesting. You ask Dr. Phil for their opinion, and they pore over the data for a while before conferring with you on a private channel. What are your conclusions? These things in the egg are like worms, but they're not worms at all, they say. They're tentacles, or appendages of some sort, torn loose from the main body. Hard to be sure since it's all disintegrating before my eyes, but it's very squid-like. The inky mucus, the structure. Notice anything else, you ask? Yes, they say. These DNA results. Does this mean what I think it means? Is this human? I think so, you say. I don't know what it means, though. Hemocyanin and hemoglobin are both present. Maybe. You decide not to share all your findings with the crew. However, in part because you're not sure what the findings suggest, but also because you fear it might scare the crew unreasonably and unnecessarily. In addition to containing traces of human DNA, the organisms within the eggs contain substances consistent with cryogenic fluid, as would have been used aboard one of the later Alpha-class predecessor ships. Did one of the ships make it here? Did it crash? Was the crew consumed by whatever was on the planet? Or was there something more at work? Moot at any rate. Eggs, cryofluid, whatever the case. The results are clear on one thing. Whatever was inside these egg sacs has been dead for a very long time. Preserved, but long dead. Regardless, it's good enough for use in the food replicator. You keep the specifics to yourself and have some drones shovel the material into the hopper. After a few minutes, it will all just be raw materials anyhow, undistinguishable from whatever else was in there. You idly wonder if whatever process happened inside those eggs didn't work much the same way, making one thing indistinguishable from another. You gladly leave the planet behind, its lone satellite still screaming into space. You wonder how high it will count before it stops. So we've got no fuel, 24 food, yes! Everyone survived. Awesome. Let's leave. That was super duper. What did the crew pick up? Oh, Geordie and Dr. Phil's got something. Geordie has the cavern photo, a suit cam photo of the egg-filled cavern on Orwell 64. Geordie LaForge insists that it doesn't convey the immensity of the cavern or the number of eggs, and both get larger with every retelling. Of course. It's a good tale. It's a good tale. Oh, egg. An egg harvested from Orwell 64 that Dr. Phil insisted on keeping. I mean, all right, fine. Got no problems with that. I mean, it's not something I would personally want to do, but hey, I'm not one to judge. I don't have that capacity. And we're going on to Benford 65 now with plenty of food and plenty of fuel. I mean, that was good, all in all. That could have been a lot worse. I am happy. I'm happy with that. Let's hope we're just as lucky this time around. Oh. So we have another planet of Terran mass. 0 Celsius. Oh, that's jumper weather. We have around 30% oxygen. Gravity error. Habitability error. That's not good. The coordinates from the strange dusty moon lead to a system with 10 planets, though only one lies within the Goldilocks zone where life has a chance. The ship has barely settled into an orbit around this planet when the ship shudders, subtly but noticeably. The crew has no idea what it means, but you know that something is amiss with the planet's gravity. Oh dear. Right, well this sounds like a Jean-Luc Picard jobby, so we'll take him along. I think we'll leave Space Wizard out of this and we'll take Dr. Phil and Mr. LaForge. I mean, it's always good to keep someone behind, isn't it? I mean, what's Dr. Phil on now? Yeah, let's max out Dr. Phil's medic and then we'll look at filling everything else up. Sounds good. We're not leaving until we solve this mystery, you tell the crew. Something down there, clearly artificial, has got us locked into orbit. A decaying orbit, I might add. If we don't resolve this, the ship will enter the atmosphere inside of a week and it won't be coming back out. There's a mixed sense of annoyance and excitement in the crew. They haven't felt very useful overall, and a sense they are actually needed for something again seems to inspire them somewhat. It isn't long before the crew is aboard the shuttle, and after about an hour they've reached the planet's surface, only to find it's entirely covered by water. Or nearly entirely. At one of the planet's magnetic poles, there is a platform of some evidently corrosion-proof substance, clearly designed as a sort of landing pad, though for a ship much larger than the shuttle. The water should be frozen here, but it isn't. There must be some geothermal activity at work. With no alternative, the crew lands in the middle of the pad beside a small structure and exits to look around. Before you ask, you inform the crew the air is breathable. Around 30% oxygen, 68% nitrogen. I don't recommend actually breathing it though. That other 2% includes unknown elements. You breathe it in and you become a superhero. It's like gamma rays, just in breathable form. I'd like to think, anyway. I think Dr. Phil should try, and then we'll see. If his eyes sort of bulge out like Arnold Schwarzenegger's in Total Recall, then we know it's not good and the others can carry on merrily. Right, so what we're going to do. Let's take some water samples. Jean-Luc Picard sticks their arm over the side of the deck to gather a sample of sea spray and catches a wave full in the face, which causes some to get sucked inside their helmet. The water doesn't taste very salty, they inform everyone. In fact, it's probably fresher than the water on the ship. Not that surprising, since most of the potable water on board is recycled urine. Nice. A fact that the crew is either blissfully unaware of or chooses to ignore. That said, there's nothing special about the sample. Further analysis will have to be done back on the ship. Alright, well, let's have a look at the platform. As far as Geordi LaForge is concerned, nothing like this could have been built on Earth. This much is immediately clear. Even assuming a reasonably shallow depth at this spot, and it certainly seems as if the water is pretty deep here, the slender legs beneath this relatively large platform seem as if they'd be capable of supporting its weight, even with local gravity only around, oh my god, 0.75 Gs. Clearly some alloy unknown to the crew was used in its construction. Geordi LaForge attempts to take a sample, but no tool available is able to even scratch the surface. Ooh, that's what we can make our armour out of. Get a better look at the structure. A slender cylinder juts up through the centre of the platform, approximately 10 metres in circumference. The sloped roof is evidently hydrophobic to some extent. Rivulets of water wriggle chaotically and unpredictably off the sides without beading, despite the mist. There's enough room under the roof, however, for as many as a dozen humans to gather, so even if the crew was interested in risking a breath of air, there'd be no danger of water dripping down their neck while they either enjoyed the fresh air or suffocated it. Equally spaced around the cylinder are what appears to be 4 distinct panels, inset into the cylinder itself with only the thinnest of grooves separating them. 3 of them bear no markings whatsoever. The 4th panel is set off by itself a bit further than the others and contains a cryptic engraving. 1 plus 8 plus equals 8 plus F plus 1000 equals something 20. Oh, come on, says Dr. Phil. Logic puzzles? Do they want us to find them or not? If they, and I think we're all assuming that they means humans, weren't sure who was going to read this, a puzzle makes sense, says Geordi LaForge. And this one seems simple enough if you're human. Clearly, those are all ways of depicting numbers, and only a human would understand them all. So I'm going to work out the first equation. Okay. The first one is clearly 1 plus 8 plus 1, says Geordi LaForge. That third bit there is Morse code for the number 1. Oh, okay. Dit, da, 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 da. So I guess that adds up to 10. Figure out the second equation. Okay. The second one is a bit more uncertain since they could be read in different ways, says Geordi LaForge. But I think we can agree that if each of these is written using a different number system, then that 1000 is not actually 1000. I is clearly Roman numeral 8, and F could be a number of things, but the most obvious would be hexadecimal, which makes it 15. My gut says the 1000 is binary, so that's an 8. So it's 8 plus 15 plus 8, so 31. Pulls out the final equation, all right. Okay, says Geordi LaForge. We've got 1 plus 8 plus 1, which is 10, equals 8 plus 15 plus 8, which is 31. So 10 equals 31, which equals something else, 120, 220, how? Geordi LaForge says, so it's 10 equals 31 equals something 20. But how does 10 equal 31? The crew thinks on it for a while. Maybe it's leet speak, says Geordi LaForge. Really can't get my tongue around his name today. Only humans would know that, surely. That would make it maybe lo equals L equals something zo. If that's it, then it has to be azo, says Dr. Phil. That's the only word that is 3 letters and ends in Z-O. How do you know that, you ask? Hey, I used to do crosswords. It's good to memorise the 3-letter words, especially the ones with Q and Z. Well, if no one else has a better idea, Geordi LaForge walks up to the panel and traces a letter A on the blank space with a steady finger. They have no idea why that seems like the right thing to do, but it works. There's a grinding sound, and when they check, the crew finds that the centremost door has slid open. So we're going to walk through the middle door. The centre door opens into a chamber approximately 2 metres in circumference, resembling nothing so much as an elevator. There's enough room inside for up to 8 people, although it would be a tight fit. Once the crew is inside, there's a moment of awkward shuffling during which nothing much happens. But then, with a slight hum, the door slides shut, and in pitch blackness the elevator begins to descend. The elevator descends from what seems like an eternity, and the air grows stale and thick with fear. The blackness seems to close in, and Dr. Phil begins to panic. Excuse me a second. Laughing fit. Do apologise. It's all well over, isn't it? We're all dead and this is hell. We're going to hell! Everyone's nerves are unsettled, but by the time the elevator doors opens, no one is very happy with Dr. Phil or the situation. 4th floor, menswear, appliances and electronics. Nerves rattled, Dr. Phil is practically clawing at the elevator doors the moment its downward motion stops. They rush out towards the dimly lit hallway as soon as the doors open with a crack. What's up with him? Just weak. Confident and weak. Yes. The crew cautiously moves down the corridor. Motion lights overhead occasionally flicker on, but most of them are inoperable and the crew is forced to rely on helmet lamp light to navigate. After approximately 100 meters, the hallway comes to an abrupt end. Another hole in the floor is open to the ocean below. This time, however, the edges of the hole are jagged and bent, as if there was some other structure here at one point. It looks like there was something cylindrical here, says Geordie. That's all I'm saying. About the same dimensions as the elevator we came down here in. And judging from the stress fractures here, it looks like the entire thing collapsed. Anyone in that thing would have sunk to the bottom immediately. A bit of searching about reveals a small jagged hole, approximately a metre in circumference. It has also been torn in the side of the corridor. The metal is bent outward away from the team, almost as if something on this side had exploded. So we can crawl through the hole or go back. I mean, there's no point going back, because if we go back, we can't leave the planet. So we have to go forward. With atmospheric suits on, it's a tight fit, but everyone manages to squeeze through the hole without causing anything but cosmetic damage to Dr. Phil's helmet. Nothing that won't buff out. The crew stands up in a corridor identical to the one they just vacated, although much better lit. Immediately to their right upon entering is what appears to be a sealed metal portal, like the ones above. To the left, the corridor stretches on for about 10 meters before ending at a similar door, this one with an inscription beside it. Thick windows of some semi-transparent material that is probably not glass punctuate the walls every metre or so, making it clear, if it wasn't already, that the crew is definitely far below the surface of the planet's immense ocean. Beyond the strange hole in the wall, the corridor stretches on for another 10 metres before ending at another silvery portal. Etched into the metal over the door is the curious phrase, Homer's Sea, and beside is a panel featuring an array of seemingly thousands of colours. Wine dark, says Georgie LaForge. That's what colour it was. The riddle is entirely moot, however, because the colour panel is crushed beyond repair. Loose wiring is peeking through the twisted metal and giving off sparks. Now that they're up close, the away team's helmet lamp light also reveals that the bottom of the door panel is an equal wreck, displaying the same twisted appearance as the hole back down the hall. It's about a metre round and looks large enough to crawl through. Anyone else getting the sense that maybe we're not alone in here? Asked Dr. Phil. Whatever's making these holes is clearly very strong. Nothing on any sensor indicates any sort of life in the vicinity of the away team, however. Beside the crew, of course. The crew probably knows this, meaning that this is just foolish human speculation to alleviate apprehension. As such, you do not bother to comment. So, do we have a look at the broken door, or should we check out the panel? I mean, it's worth checking out the panel, because we can always crawl through the hole afterwards. The panel is smashed beyond repair or utility. At one time, the crew can imagine that it might have been used to select a colour to answer the riddle above the door, but it looks like someone either decided to pick all the colours at once or got frustrated with the game and decided to end it. Ah, says Geordie, throwing her hands up in frustration. Nothing I can do with this pile of spaghetti. Well, I guess we're going through the broken door. Who should crawl through the broken door? Well, this comes across... I'll have to take a quick drink because I have quite a dry throat. This comes across as, who do you want to sacrifice? So, I mean, Space Wizard, good old Space Wizard. He's a good medic, so I suppose Dr. Phil should go through the door. Before crawling through, Dr. Phil first pushes against the door to make sure it's secure. There is a brief sizzle as something connects behind the wall, and the door instantly slides into the floor with enough force to shear off the bent metal. Well, that makes it easier, says Dr. Phil. Oh, you got out of that easy. Oh. The away team makes its way through the portal and finds themselves in yet another length of corridor, almost identical to the last. Once again, there is another silvery portal about 10 metres down, but this time it's clear even from a distance that the entire mechanism has been smashed open. As before, there's also some sort of inscription over the door, but the top of the door frame has been bent and twisted to such a degree that it's not even clear what language it may have been written in. Geordie takes a clear look at the mangled wreck of the door and takes a few scans. This is all some strange alloy, they say. There's titanium, but that's about all that's identifiable. Whatever it is, though, it's clear that it would take someone quite strong to do this. It's outside the capabilities of a normal human. Whatever the case, the environment beyond the door is different from what the crew has recently seen. It's a large space, quite high and wide, and filled with a mist that scatters the crew's headlamps, making it difficult to see clearly beyond 3 or 4 metres out. I mean, it's not really too sensible to just go boldly into the centre of a room, which you have no idea what's about, and there's a thick mist in there. Thick mist, as far as I'm concerned, is never a good atmosphere to be in. That says to me horror or sci-fi horror of some sort, and someone's going to jump out and rip your face off. So let's keep around the edges of the room for the time being. The away team moves clockwise around the room, which reveals nothing of particular interest save for the fact that there is only the one entrance, and that the room is immense, probably 50 metres across, and seemingly just as high. Portions of the walls are transparent, revealing, if it wasn't already clear, that the crew is still fairly deep underwater. Jean-Luc Picard stops a few paces before they fully complete their loop around the room, studying the wall. That looks like a letter K to me. Am I crazy? Headlamps are focused on the spot, and indeed there is what appears to be a large K drawn onto the wall, across both metal and whatever transparent material makes up the window. That's blood, isn't it? Asked Dr. Phil. I knew it. I knew it. Of course it's not blood, says Dr. Phil. It looks nothing like dried blood. It's too dark, almost blue. It's probably just some kind of paint. Right, so Dr. Phil at this point has become a bit of a schizophrenic through fear. That's fine. That's fine. We all have our weaknesses. That's fine. So we'll back around the edge or move to the centre. Let's move back around the edge and see if there's any more letters. Jean-Luc Picard refuses to budge. We've wasted enough time and this place is creepy. It's probably just a smudge on the glass. Let's just get over there and get this over with. The crew gives up the wall walking and heads straight to the centre of the room. At the centre of the immense chamber is a transparent cylinder, inside of which is another slightly more slender shaft, stretching up through the ceiling and down into the darkness below. A faint shimmer is visible from within the inner cylinder, but much more noticeable are what appear to be rock formations all over its surface. A single open portal appears to be the only way into the space between the cylinders. Directly beside it is what appears to be a smashed control panel with a long steel rod buried in the centre. Above it, etched into the glass-like surface of the outer cylinder, is a message. No man shall not blind me. Bad grammar. Oh, I am a bit of a grammar Nazi. No, wait, says Jean-Luc Picard. I think it's literature. From the Odyssey, sort of. No man is the name that Odysseus gave to the Cyclops, Polyphemus, after he blinded him. But I don't think that exact quote is in there. Some sort of test for humanity, maybe? Oh, come on, says Dr. Phil. They couldn't just leave a note. Hey guys, here's the combination to the gravity control. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Thanks, bye. I suppose whoever made all this thought it was necessary to protect it, says Geordie LaForge, from something non-human, something that wouldn't be able to understand analogies. Or coded messages. Although insane, says Dr. Phil, I know I'd go insane, being down here for however long it took to build this. Exactly how long would it take to build all this anyway? Could one of the earlier ships from Earth be responsible? They only left Earth a few decades ago. That's a good question, says Geordie. Don't know how deep it goes, of course, but even if this is the only structure, and assuming they had to extract all the material from a craft or from the bottom of the ocean, a long time. At least decades. If we assume just one crew from one ship, maybe longer, made a century or more. The Great Pyramid at Giza supposedly took 20 years to build, and that was on dry land, with 100,000 workers, and it was just stacking a bunch of rocks on top of each other. This is much a bigger task. Just wildly guessing, of course, Geordie shrugs. We have no idea what we're dealing with here. This could all be alien. Upon closer inspection, the control panel isn't a control panel at all, nor is it smashed. A better description would be that it's a toolbox of some sort. Holes of various shapes and sizes fill the sloped surface, with rods of various materials, thicknesses and lengths filling in many of them. The rod in the centre just happens to be much longer than the others, and thus more noticeable. Nothing like this in my databases. Might be worth noting that in the Odyssey, no man blinded the Cyclops with a spear or something, says Geordie LaForge. Maybe this rod belongs in a different hole. The inner cylinder clearly contains something, but whatever it is dancing at the periphery of human vision. On the outside of the cylinder, from top to bottom, are strange lumps that look almost like plastic or stone barnacles of some sort. I don't think there's anything in there at all, at least nothing involving photons, says Geordie LaForge. The shimmer might just be vibration. I bet that's some sort of focused gravity beam. I have no idea how such a thing would work, but that sort of seems like why we're here, no? To shut it off? At the base of the inner cylinder, almost completely covered by the strange barnacle things, is a receptacle of some sort. The crew discusses the matter briefly, and everyone agrees that this is pretty simply a round peg in a round hole situation. You know what I think? Asked Dr. Phil. I think this is all weird and stupid, and whoever did this was stupid and bored and probably insane, and this is dumb, and I want to go home. Let's grab the big rod and shove it in the little hole and get out of here. Who should try to disable the gravity device? I think we should have a little bit of education when it comes to this. I don't think Dr. Phil's the man to do it. I think Geordie LaForge should probably chuck it in. He is the engineer after all. Geordie takes the rod with both hands and pulls it from its socket. At 2 meters long and as thick as a small fist, it's awkward to handle, but they manage well enough. Without hesitation, Geordie takes the rod and walks into the cylinder, prodding ahead to try and find a place to shove it. This has the effect of dislodging several of the barnacle-like things, which fall to the floor and crumble to pieces. Weird, says Geordie. There are some longer pieces of these things, like tentacles or something maybe, but it's all dried up, so it's hard to tell. I guess they were attracted to this thing's vibrations and it killed them. Anyway, here goes nothing. They jam the rod into the socket at the base of the inner cylinder. Back on the ship, you can instantly tell that something has changed. Gravity has returned to normal, and you begin to adjust your decaying orbit to something more stable. Evacuate immediately or take some samples from the chamber. I mean, do we push our luck? We've done pretty well so far. I'd like to think, because we're okay on food and fuel, that taking some samples is probably a bad thing. Hanging around is probably a bad thing. There's a reason the gravity must be kept down, maybe to keep the water down, so it didn't flood the place. So I think we should evacuate immediately. You alert the crew that normal gravity appears to have returned and tell them to make for the shuttle immediately. The crew heads back down the long set of corridors and up to the platform, and before long they are back on the ship. Prior to their arrival, there was a brief transmission from the planet, broadcast from the same mechanism that was projecting the graviton particles. You analyse the data and discover that it was the next set of coordinates. Within an hour or so, the ship is already halfway to the system's heliopause, the new course already plotted. You inform the crew that new coordinates were received automatically and that a course has been plotted. They ask about the destination, of course, but there's not much you can tell them. It's not a system that any human ever named, much less knew about. You show them some spots of light on a map, and they get bored and wander off. So, it would appear we are on the right track to finding the perfect home, which is good. And no one died, which is even better. So, well, let's jump, shall we, and see where this takes us. Lights, jump! And this is where we shall end it. Let's have a quick look-see. Oh, we got two. We got Clark 67 and Finney 61. What have the crew got? Geordie and John. Geordie has formula notes, Jump 6, Benford 65, a copy of the odd formula found on Benford 65. After returning to the ship, Geordie LaForge ran through the formula again and noted correctly that it requires an intersection of human knowledge from a range of different time periods and cultures. Oh, fancy. And Jean-Luc, he has the water sample, a sample of water from Benford 65 collected by Jean-Luc Picard. And that is where we are going to leave this episode. We're on the right track. Fuel is great. Food is okay. I'm very happy that no one else has died. So we are doing a-okay. Let's see if we can find this mystical planet to settle our survivors on. And hopefully everyone will be able to live happily happily very soon. That was terribly put. But thank you for watching. As always, a like is appreciated. And I'll catch you on the next one. Take it easy.